Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to England once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but they were also known to produce a very good imperial stout too, from what I saw and from what I tried. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've had from these guys many times before. It's a style that I know they can do very well, and from what I gather, it's a style they haven't done in about 2 years, and this particular beer was one that they released a few years ago, and it kicked off a very solid period of releases from these guys, from what I've heard too. So needless to say, I'm really curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching this one enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to England like I said. We're going to go to the northeast of the country, to the city of Newcastle upon Tyne, and we're going to have a look then at another beer from Wylam Brewery. So this particular beer is called Revenge of the Greenbutt Skunk. It comes in at 8.4% ABV, and this is another New England hazy imperial double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is another beer that I picked up at the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant along in Dunfermline, and Colin there was telling me that this is a beer that he really rates, and this was released about 2 years ago from what he was saying, and it was him that told me that this beer kicked off a period of some really solid New England hazy IPAs. But this was apparently voted for by fans of Wylam Brewery because they were going to bring back one of the double IPAs as a kind of one-off release, and this is the one that happened. But yeah, I never tried this beer when I was living in Durham back in 2017, 2018, so it must have been released quite a bit after that actually. But yeah, back then Wylam were doing some really good stuff, and it was always nice to try the new things that they were pumping out there. But yeah, let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Wylam Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging systems. Just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlists of beers from different countries. If you want to have a little look at other ones, you can do that as well, but you will find this beer in the English playlist along with a number of other things. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit once again about Wylam Brewery for the first time in what feels like a good wee while. But yeah, Wylam Brewery was founded by John Boyle and Robin Layton in the small village of Wylam, hence the name, which is to the north of Newcastle in the northeast of England, and the company was founded in the year 2000. So both men had taken early retirement. John had been a computer engineer, and he met Rob, who was a former sea captain and avid home brewer. But John fixed Rob's PC one day, which took a very long time, and apparently Robin and John agreed on a payment of 5 gallons of the Weiss beer that they'd been drinking for fixing the computer, and that was how the idea of starting a brewery was born. But Robin was really interested in barley wine, stouts and sours, which really weren't popular in the northeast of England at the time, and both he and John wanted to see these beers reintroduced into their local pubs. So they produced their first beer, which was called Landlord's Choice, back in August of 2000. It was an English bitter, and the beer became very popular through word of mouth. But Robin only remained with the company until around 2003, but he managed to build a team of Ben Wilkinson, Christopher Lee and Lee Holworth, who are still at the brewery today. But John convinced his son to move back from Spain and take over his share of the company, and they then moved premises to Headon-on-Wall in 2006, and this kicked off quite a substantial period of growth for the brewery. But these days, the brewery is now also co-owned by Rob Cameron and Dave Stone, who were both running nightclubs in Newcastle after having had lengthy careers in the music industry. But the two guys had grown tired of this, and they decided that they wanted to move into beer, and so they bought two pubs. This was the Bridge Tavern and Town Wall, and these pubs quickly became Wylam's biggest customer. So they approached the guys at Wylam to see about buying into the brewery, and this move was accepted, and they joined the company in 2015. The following year, in 2016, the brewery moved into the Palace of Arts in Exhibition Park, which was a military vehicle museum, and it was actually scheduled for demolition before being saved by Freddie and Bruce Shepherd. But it took them 2 years to plan this move, but now the brewery has a 30-barrel brewhouse with a smaller 15-barrel pilot kit, and they've got a brewery tap and restaurant in there as well. And they do also host some concerts in that venue, from what I understand too. But the current head brewer at Wylam Brewery is Ben Wilkinson. He also had a background in the pub industry, and in recent times the increase in capacity that they've had has allowed them to do a lot of New England hazy IPAs and sour beers too, which really helped them increase their reputation with the more kind of modern craft beer drinkers. But they've also kept a number of their longer serving beers to keep their long-standing followers happy too. But these days they can produce up to 100 hectolitres of beer per day, and as of August 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced about 200 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Wylam Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's that. So let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I'd just like to have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see the Greenbutt Skunk on the label there, which is quite nice, I have to say. Plain silver top on the top of the can. It is incidentally a 440ml can, which is what we've seen from Wylam many times before. At the bottom of the name part of the label you can see the Wylam Brewery symbol, but I'm not sure how well the camera is going to focus on that because the can is sweating a little bit, unfortunately. I think my mum and dad's fridge is a little bit colder than it should be for beer, but we just need to deal with that. But yeah, as I said earlier, this one is an 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double, if you want to call it IPA, and this one has been hopped with some classics: Citra from the US, Nelson Sauvin from New Zealand, and Galaxy from Australia. Citra, of course, 14% alpha acid, and a New England Hazy. It's going to give you some lovely juicy mango notes, also a little touch of grapefruit and some lemon limey character. Nelson Sauvin from New Zealand, 16% alpha acid. It's going to give you that lovely big kind of white, green, grapey, gooseberry type note. And then you've got Galaxy from Australia, which will give you quite a little bit, give you a good little bit of grapefruit, a pungent passion fruit, big juicy mango, and also quite a little bit of pineapple. But yeah, classic hops, a classic mix that, you know, Citra, Nelson, and Galaxy. You can't really go wrong with that. But 8.4% ABV. Let's crack this guy open and see what we have. This should be very nice. We had some really good New Englands from Wylam Brewery back in the day, and it's been a long time since I've had this style from the brewery. So yeah, let's do this. I can tell you right away as soon as you open this, it smells very, very nice actually. Crazy to think that it's been, what, about 5 years or something since I did my teacher training in Durham, and that was when Wylam Brewery were really starting to kick off with the New England hazies and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, you can see that this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from the style. It looks absolutely lovely. So we've got maybe about 75-80% of the beer in the glass, but yeah, you can see it looks great. So before the head disappears, you can see that this one is poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. I don't think I would describe that one as being perfect white, but you can see a lovely little bit of kind of medium, you can see some lovely medium sized bubbles just sitting on the surface of the liquid there, but a nice little bit of foamy character just sitting above that. It looks great, and you can see you've got this lovely, very bright mango juice yellow colour there. It looks really very, very nice. Yeah, so I always like comparing the different New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. But yeah, definitely in this case, it's a lovely, very bright yellow mango juice sort of colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few different things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour of it as well. But yeah, when it comes to IPAs of pretty much any variety, you don't tend to have to care about those latter two variables that I mentioned. But yeah, the level of haziness in this one for an 8%er is pretty impressive. This one is pretty soupy and gloopy. So remember, when it comes to New England hazies, that the level of haze depends on the oat content, the wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. Yeah, and that can vary from brewery to brewery and beer to beer. There's not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. One or two little bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass at the bottom there, and yeah, a few going up toward the surface. But you can see the head has faded away to be a really nice kind of thin foamy layer, and you've just got that thicker ring around the edge of the glass. But as I say, it looks pretty damn nice, this one, I have to say. So we can have a little look at the aroma of this beer then now and see what it has in store for us. Don't think we need to say any more about that appearance. So let's do it. Yeah. I'm going to say this one just smells absolutely beautiful. And you know, Colin at the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant, he's always pointed me in the direction of some really nice stuff. Quite often, you know, if he tends to have things in, new things in from different breweries, and I tend to just ask him what his favourite was and pick that one. But yeah, I think in this case, you can tell from the aroma that he's chosen a nice beer in this case. So thank you, Colin, for this. But yeah, it gives you everything you would expect of the style, everything you'd expect in Wylam, and you know, pretty much what you'd expect from the 3 hops involved in this one. Yeah, you've got that lovely big smooth creamy malt base, you've got lovely juicy fruits, and you've just got that nice green component too. It smells beautiful. So yeah, let's just break the aroma down then and describe it for you that wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust coming out of this one. Teeny little hint of a woody character in there, but with this one I'm not getting so much in the way of kind of crackery character that you can sometimes get from this style. It's got like, it has got a little bit of that, but not overly much. So as I've said in many New England reviews over the years, for me there are 6 different elements to think about when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of these beers. So you can have the kind of farmhousey yeasty side of things, the rye leaning grainy side of things. Those are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs because you had the farmhousey characters such as Alchemist and Hill Farm. So that was what the style really used to be. But then you also have the kind of wheaty bitey side, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things. And yeah, the European brewed New England IPAs have tended to evolve a little bit more along those lines. But for me, this seems like it's a very oat leaning and barley malt leaning New England double. I think that's fair to say, but we'll see how we get on with it when we actually taste it. But yeah, for me, the above the kind of bread crusty character, there's a lovely, very smooth and actually quite dense white bready character to this one. You can smell a little bit of a kind of zippy wheat coming out of this beer too. I do remember that Wylam's New England IPAs tended to be a little bit more kind of wheaty and kind of bitey, so still getting a little bit of that vibe out of this one. And you get a little bit of the wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose in particular, but you can smell the little bit more kind of dense white bready and kind of zippy character coming out of this one, which is always great to get. But yeah, the aroma coming out of this is really lovely in that sense. The wheaty character is great, but on top of that, I'm getting quite a little bit of smooth, creamy, oaty character. And as I've always said, oaty character is an interesting thing when it comes to New England IPAs, because it can quite often give you an idea of how old your New England IPA is. Essentially, the smoother and creamier the oaty character appears in the aroma and the flavour, the fresher the beer is, the drier it is, the older the beer is. But this one is really, really creamy and very, very fresh. But I'm drinking this one pretty much a day or two after I bought it at the Caledonian, and you know they're getting their beers from Newcastle, pretty damn fresh. So yeah, lovely big kind of oaty creamy character coming out of this one. You've also got the yeah, you can smell that lovely oaty creamy note in there. You do have a slight degree of sweetness to this one, and that's also to be expected when you're moving into the double, triple, and quadruple type category of New England IPA. But with this one, for me, you've got a little bit of Werther's Original in there. There's a little tiny hint of biscuit as well. But yeah, it's not overly sweet. There's a little bit of that, but I feel this one really leans toward that more kind of creamy, smooth oaty side of things, and it's that dominates the aroma of the malty side of things in this beer for me. So yeah, I like that. I do like that. It's lovely. The malty, I could sit and smell this all day. Just the combination of aromas in this beer is absolutely great. But I think at that point we can move on to the green component. I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is using a little bit of cryo, actually, just because of how kind of wet and kind of slightly oily the green component smells. And I think, yeah, Citra, Nelson, and I don't know about Nelson, but Citra and Galaxy at least are available in cryo form, and I would not be surprised if that's the case with this one, just because of how creamy and smooth this beer smells. But yeah, in terms of the green component of this beer, you do get a tiny bit of earthiness out of this one. Not a lot at all, but you've got a lovely floral component to the beer, which actually comes across as quite wet and quite oily. Then you've got a brighter, more zesty, grassy character coming out of it too. But yeah, you can smell with this one that it's. I'm pretty sure this is going to be cryo. I'm sure there's some cryo hops available or have been used to brew this one. It's just quite obvious from the aroma. We'll see. We'll confirm that when we actually taste the beer, of course. But yeah, green component in this one is pretty much what you would expect from the style, and yeah, the fruity side of things is what you'd expect from the hops. So let's just focus on that for a second before we actually taste this one. But yeah, fruity side of things, when you sugar this beer up, you get a really nice little bit of an almost candied, like sherbety type thing out of it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, getting a lot of nice kind of juicy passion fruit out of this one, big juicy mangoes as well. You're getting a little tiny touch of the drier apricot and pineapple and stuff like that in there too. But yeah, big passion fruit, lot of mangoes. These are both coming from the Citra and the Galaxy for the most part. And yeah, on top of that you get a lovely kind of pineapple and papaya type quality too, which I think that's going to come from the pineapple is going to come from the Galaxy, I think, more than the Citra, and the papaya is going to come from the Citra, I would say. If I was smelling this blind, I would probably think that it was Idaho 7 because of how juicy the mango is, and then the softer notes that it has. So that's quite interesting. But of course you've got a big sort of gooseberry, white green grapey character coming out of this one too from the Nelson Sauvin. And yeah, it's just absolutely lovely. The aroma of this one is really spot on, and I could sit and smell this all day. I think this is great. So yeah, aroma wise, beautiful smelling beer, this one. Surprised it's not got a little bit more lemon limey character, to be honest with you, because that's something you will get from Citra, but absolutely great. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. This is going to be good. I can tell from the aroma this is going to be good, and it's very fresh too. So let's get the rest of this poured into the glass and just see how we go. But yeah, this is Revenge of the Greenbutt Skunk, an 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Wylam Brewery in the Exhibition Park in Newcastle in the northeast of England. My brain's just starting to shut down now, but let's have a taste of this one. 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double, if you want to call it IPA. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty damn good actually. Yeah, it's interesting, this one, because, you know, I was going on in about how the aroma of this one was like really creamy and really quite oaty, but then when I actually take it in, it actually has a bit more of that wheaty, bitey side of things to it, and that's what I remember. I do remember the Wylam New England's being a little bit more along the lines of the Trillium stuff. You know, it was always Treehouse were the more oaty, creamy ones, and Trillium were the more kind of wheaty, bitey ones. So yeah, now that I think about it, having tasted it, yeah, that is an interesting point to make. But again, it's a really solid New England double. You can't ask for much more than that these days, because there are so many of these beers on the market. But yeah, it's nice. I feel it feels like a wee while since I drank this particular beer style, because I've been reviewing so much German stuff recently. But yeah, this is pretty damn good actually. So big thumbs up to Wylam Brewery once again. Yeah. So I say straight away, quite a wheaty, bitey leaning New England double. Big bright green component too. Wondering if I'm wrong about what I said in the cryo with this one. In fairness, but now that I get the aftertaste, maybe not. And then you've got that lovely big juicy and slightly oily fruity component too. So yeah, the way this one goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. Yeah, lovely beer this. Big thumbs up from me. So let's break this beer down then and describe the flavour a bit more in depth for you. So middle third of the palate then, you can feel the backbone of this beer. You've got that lovely, soft, fresh, white bready bread crust sitting in there. Absolutely great. So your lovely, soft, fresh white bread crust almost feels as if it has a little bit of that kind of floury character to it, you know, straight out of the bakery. But further forward on that middle third of your palate, you'll get a little touch of woody character there. It's quite a sweet woody note. So yeah, you can feel that going on in this particular beer. So yeah, a little touch of a kind of woody character coming out of this one. And then yeah, above the kind of bread crusty notes. Yeah, above the kind of bread crusty notes, you get a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker, but not overly much. Then you start to get a kind of fluffy and slightly sweet white bready layer in there. And then above that, you're getting the wheat, and the wheat does have quite a little bit of bitiness to it in this beer. And again, that's something that from memory was always a bit typical of the Wylam New Englands. They were always a little bit more kind of wheaty and bitey and things. This beer, you know, for a New England, it actually has a little bit more bitterness to it as well, but we'll come to the hoppy side of things a wee bit later on. But yeah, bread crust, bit of wood, bit of cracker, fluffy and slightly sweet white bread in there, and then above that you start to get the more the kind of more dense white bready wheaty character pushing its way out of this one. But it's great. I really like how that goes together. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. The beer does get more bitey and wheaty and bitter the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, you do get a good little bit of more oaty character coming out of this one too. So in the wheaty bitey sort of thing that comes out of this one. The wheaty bitey sort of thing that comes out of this one, I would say it really lingers there into the aftertaste. But yeah, the kind of wheaty bitey sort of thing that comes out of this one into the aftertaste really lingers there, and you do get an almost dankness from the hops too, which is great. But yeah, if you go down that middle line of your tongue, you can feel there's a good little bit of an oaty, creamy sort of thing coming out of this beer. So yeah, nice little bit of oaty, creamy sort of thing coming out of this one, and you can feel, yeah, it's quite dense as you go down that middle line of your palate, but it just gets a little bit drier and things as you go toward the edge of your palate there. And in the dead centre of that middle third of your tongue, you get a little bit more of a kind of, you do get a little bit of that sweetness there, the Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. And yeah, I do really like how that pieces together. It's great. So yeah, the little bit of sweetness there doesn't linger too long, but it does just, yeah, you just have that little bit of contrast to the wheaty bitiness and the slight oaty creaminess that the beer has. So yeah, I think that describes everything that's really going on in the middle third of your palate. This beer is an interesting one because it really differs quite a wee bit from what I was thinking it would be from the aroma of the beer. The different nuances in the flavours are quite interesting. But yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate then. So we can look at the back third of your palate. So as I said, pardon me, as I've said many times on the channel, you have to remember that trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours are going to come out further forward and more dry and bitter flavours are going to come out further back on the palate. So yeah, on the back third of your palate, you have a really nice kind of blend of things going on, but yeah, in the back third of your palate you're going to get similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. So yeah, nice little bit of bready build up in there. You've got a softer white bread underneath, and you can feel a little bit more of a kind of bitey, wheaty bread on the top. The base of that back third of your palate, you can feel the bread crust is there. Again, it feels a little bit kind of drier and things. You've got a bit of cracker above that too, which is nice, and the cracker is a little bit drier too. But then you get that that white bready layer, which is really quite light and airy on that back third of your palate. So you can feel that in there. It's not quite as sweet either. It is a little bit drier, and then on top of that, you get the wheaty character. So you can feel that kind of more wheaty, bitey, almost like spicy character just forming the top of that malty part on the back third of your palate there. So that's sitting there, and it's very nice. But yeah, I think that that does go together really well, and that gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah. On top of that, on the back third of your palate, you're getting a little bit of yeasty character out of this one. For me, the yeasty character is like quite a dense and sweet mix of white and brown bread. So yeah, a little bit of a dense white and brown bready character coming out of this one, and then wrapped around that, you get a little bit of woodiness and a little bit of crackery character in there, and then wrapped around it, you get a wee bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, which is great. And again, that just lingers on the top of that back third of your palate. But it's very nice. The yeasty character you get out of this one does take a back seat to the green component and to the kind of wheaty bitiness that the beer has. I'm wondering if I've maybe opened up this beer but it's just a little bit too fresh, you know. You sometimes have to let these beers sit in the can a wee bit just to kind of mellow out, actually. You should really drink these beers about 2 or 3 weeks after they've been canned. But still, as it stands, very good beer. So yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, I think that's the malty and yeasty side of this beer covered, to be honest with you. Let's have a wee look at the green component in this one. So yeah, with this beer, I was saying in the aroma that it came across as being quite oily in its green component, which would indicate cryo, but you do get quite a little bit of bitterness and boldness from this beer. So yeah, in the back corners of the palate there's a teeny little bit of earthiness there, but as you move further forward you do get a nice deep floral aromatic sort of thing going on to this one, which could indicate a couple of things. But as you move further forward you get a little bit more kind of spiciness out of it. But yeah, when it comes to the green component of your beer, and with IPAs, you have to remember there are 3 different kinds of hoppings. So you have early addition hopping, which takes place usually within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you bitterness for the most part. And in terms of flavour and aroma, it gives you quite a deep and dank sort of character. But you've got late addition hopping as well, which happens within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And also it will give you quite a bright green component in terms of the aroma and the actual flavour of the beer. But then dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, that's all flavour and aroma, and again that's going to give you a more bright flavour and aroma in that sense. But yeah, New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs tend to use all 3, which is why they have that deeper and danker aroma. But generally speaking, when we're talking about New England IPAs, I would describe this one as being a bit more bitter and a bit more dank than some of the other ones that we've had in this particular category. So as I said, yeah, as you move further forward with this one, you get a little bit of depth and dankness out of the green component, and then round the front curve of your palate, you get a bit of a zesty, grassy character coming out of it. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite nice. So, yeah, the way that this one goes together, I think, is really very nice. The green component, I think, it's good, and the beer gets juicier and juicier the further into the aftertaste that you go to. But as I say, round the front curve of your palate, you've got this lovely zesty, grassy character coming out of this one, which I do enjoy. But I think we've said everything we need to about the green component. Let's have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, a little bit of a kind of sweeter white bread underneath, and a wee bit of the wheaty, more bitey bread coming out on top of that. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got the fresh white bready bread crust, a little bit of the cracker, then the dense white bread on top of that, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And again, this one is kind of what you'd expect. At the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a wee bit more of a kind of grapefruity. You do have a little bit of that more dense grapefruity sort of thing that comes out of this one. As you move further forward, you get a big, quite a pungent passion fruit actually, and both of those elements are going to come from the Galaxy and the Citra in here. But as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you have a little bit of you do have a little touch of like an apricot papaya character in the base, but then you've got a really ripe, juicy mango sitting on top of that, and a wee bit of pineapple there too. So the mango is going to come from both the Citra and the Galaxy, but the pineapple I think is most likely to come from the Galaxy. Not sure exactly which one you're more likely to get the apricot from, but the papaya I think is definitely the Citra. But then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's all about the Nelson Sauvin, that kind of oily grape, that oily kind of gooseberry, white green grapey sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that that goes together in this beer is really quite nice. Just behind the front tip of the tongue, you do get a good little bit of a kind of lemon limey, kind of zesty character coming out of the beer, which I think is great. And yeah, I think that that's really nice with this one. Overall, as I've said, this beer has a surprising amount of like floral aromaticity, spiciness, and then quite a little bit of wheaty zip to it, which is really interesting. So quite different to the other examples I've had in this style bracket in recent times, but quite typical of what I had from Wylam in the past. So yeah, really nice beer actually. A little bit of a change of pace when it comes to this style. But I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour profile of this beer, to be honest with you. So we can round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel of this one. So for me, this is at the top end of the mid-bodied part of the spectrum. Carbonation is very smooth. The beer does have an element of creaminess to its mouthfeel, but at the same time it gives you a little bit more kind of dryness and bitterness into the aftertaste. Like I've repeated a few times, this is one of the more bitter and wheaty, spicy examples of this style that I've had over the last wee while. So for me, the IBU count, what can we say? I think this one's got to be at least 50 or 60 IBUs. Yeah, 50 or 60 IBUs for me at this point. You know, New England doubles, you tend to add a little bit more bitterness to them just to balance things out more. Quite often it can be 40 IBUs. This one, the bitterness that I'm getting out of this beer might just be because of how fresh it is. But like I say, for me, 50 or 60 IBUs doesn't seem unreasonable for this one. The malt base, like we said, you've got a lovely little bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, bit of creaminess and stuff on top with just a little touch of sweetness in the fruity side of the beer. Mainly it has quite a bit of a grapefruity punch to it. Good little bit of juicy tropical fruit in there as well. Then the more oily gooseberry characters from the Nelson Sauvin. So yeah, lovely mix of fruity character in this beer. But yeah, definitely quite a bitter and floral take on the New England Double IPA for me. But at the same time, the big wheaty zip that this beer has kind of makes me reminisce a little bit about the Wylam beers that I had back in the day. But I think we can safely say this is another very, very solid beer from Wylam Brewery. My first New England double from these guys in quite a few years, and I have certainly enjoyed it. So again, I thank Colin at Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant in Dunfermline for recommending this one to me. A bit of a change of pace when it comes to this particular style category. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. Been a really interesting beer to try, actually. So this was the Revenge of the Greenbutt Skunk, an 8.4% New England Imperial Hazy Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Wylam Brewery in Newcastle down in the northeast of England. So let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Wylam Brewery as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.